Good morning, everyone. Thank you to everyone who is joining us today for our Professional Women's Alliance. I'm going to give it just a couple of moments while our participants come in from the waiting room, and then we will get started with our keynote speaker. Again, we're very excited to have so many of you joining us today. I know that you're really going to enjoy the program. It does look like our participants are filing in, so we will go ahead and get started. My name's Janelle Tassert. I am with the Greater Phoenix Chamber, and we are so excited to have all of you here virtually for our Professional Women Alliance webinar today. For those of you who don't know, the Professional Women's Alliance provides a unique opportunity to hear from inspiring women leaders throughout our community. We are so proud to host so many dynamic female leaders each month to share their insights on leadership, career growth, and their community involvement. And we have a very dynamic leader joining us today. I want to thank our sponsors, APS, BOK Financial, Slalom, and University of Phoenix. We very much appreciate your continued support of PWA and women's programs throughout the Valley. So a big virtual round of applause to all of you. Before we jump in, I just want to note that after Carla's presentation, we'll have some time for Q&A. So throughout the program, if you have questions, you can submit them through the Q&A box at the side of your screen or the chat feature, and then we'll monitor those and get through as many as possible as time permits at the end of the presentation. It's now my pleasure to welcome our presenter for today. Carla Vargas Jasa is the President and CEO of Valley of the Sun United Way, a social services organization which serves the 4.3 million people of Maricopa County by uniting our community to support kids, families, and the neighborhoods where they live. Carla joined Valley of the Sun United Way in June 2019 as the first female and Latina president and CEO. Prior to this role, she held several leadership roles for Orange County United Way, and it was there that she guided the launch of United to End Homelessness, a community-wide response to Orange County's growing homelessness problem. Carla earned a bachelor's in political science from the University of California at Berkeley. In both 2015 and 2016, she was recognized as a nominee for the Orange County Business Journal's Women in Business Award. And in 2012, she received the OC Metro's 40 Under 40 Award. In her free time, Carla enjoys spending time with her husband, hiking in the Arizona desert, and exploring new wineries north and south of the border. I am pleased to welcome Carla Vargas Jasa. Carla, take it away.
Thank you, Janelle, for that introduction, and good morning, everybody. I am really happy to have been invited to share my story with you today, and thrilled to have joined the board of directors of the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce recently. Todd Sanders has been a part of our board of directors at Valley of the Sun United Way this past year and has been an incredible support. And before I get started, I want to share that this is not just my story that you're going to hear today. It's a story of a number of extraordinary women who've helped me to get here, who I've partnered with, and have supported me along the way. That's starting with Maria Harper-Marinick, who I'm sure you all know, who was chair of the search committee, who brought me here to town. Jenny Holzman-Tatro, who's our board chair. She and I started on this journey together as a first woman duo, as CEO and board chair, and she's been very engaged and involved with the community. I'm sure many of you know her. I have an incredible executive team of women with Tanya Muniz, who's our CFO, Tamara Scrovan, who's our Chief Donor Impact Officer, Penny Ellie Taylor, our Chief Public Policy Officer, and on the Public Policy Committee of the Chamber, and the Valley of the Sun United Way staff, which is mostly women. And I'm just so proud to have worked with all of them. I know many of them are on this session today. So thank you all for joining today, and thank you for all that you have done to make this past year an extraordinary year. So my story is their story, and I thank them for being a part of it. So let's get started. And as we get started, I'm going to take a moment to share some slides to help us along. So let me try this. Let's see how this goes. Give me a minute. Here we go. All right. So here we are. And I will share that, the theme of this presentation is Welcome to Phoenix. And that is because I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary as the first woman, and as Janelle said, the first Latina CEO of Value the Sun United Way. And I'll tell you, I actually learned that when I saw the press release of me joining the team. So it's been really fun to be a part of the team. And not only did I just celebrate my first year of CEO of this organization, I also just marked the first full year of living with my husband for the first time. So that's after 1 year of marriage and 10 years of being together. And it has been an interesting, eventful, and tremendous year on both fronts in a lot of different ways. And I'll share more about that later. And this picture that you see here is a picture of our team at our staff retreat. We were at the Girl Scouts, so we had a camp theme, and just so thrilled to be a part of this amazing, amazing team and what we've accomplished over this past year. So what I'd like to be able to share with you today overall is, first of all, what led me here, why Value the Sun United Way, what my plan was for the year, and then COVID happened, as we all know, and then I'm going to share some lessons learned that hopefully will be helpful to you and to your colleagues as you're considering new leadership opportunities and jumping into a new role. So let's start with what led me here. So a lot of my journey actually starts well before I was even born, and it starts with my parents. My parents are from a very unknown country in South America called Paraguay. So I am a first-generation American. I was born here after my parents came here from there, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Paraguay was actually the country in South America with the longest standing dictatorship of the Southern Hemisphere. And my father was an active student leader against that dictatorship. When he was in college, he led protests against the dictatorship. He was the head of a student movement there. And this news article actually depicts one of those protests, which was the most famous when Rockefeller came to Paraguay to visit because he had interest there. And his group actually intentionally demonstrated in front of him being there to show the atrocities of that dictatorship in front of the US. My father was thrown in jail and was tortured for that activism many times. And he and my mother met when my mom actually saw him leading one of these protests and was very impressed with him. And after he pursued her for some time, they fell in love and got married. And that's a picture of them getting married in Paraguay. But shortly after they got married, they had to leave the country because my father was blacklisted because of his activism. And so my mom picked up everything that she knew and moved with my father around the world, starting with Peru, where my dad got his master's degree, his MBA. Then the joke was I was a week away from being born German because my father got the acceptance letter to Penn State to get his PhD there a week before I got the acceptance letter to university in Germany. And so I was born in student housing in State College, Pennsylvania, while my father was getting his PhD. And my father's first assignment after he got his PhD was as a professor at the U of A. And so I have early roots in Tucson, and this is a picture of us, our first Thanksgiving in Tucson. That's my mom and dad on the left. You can definitely tell it is the mid-70s, and that's me on the right and my little pigtails, having my first probably piece of turkey. And my mom was an incredible inspiration just by the fact that she left everything, didn't speak much English, came to the States with my dad, and was an amazing mother to me. And she taught me that I could do everything. And so I loved Wonder Woman, and I love to dress up as Wonder Woman. I'm not saying I am Wonder Woman, but we had such an amazing time just making costumes over the years. And I just absolutely love the fact that she instilled so much confidence in me. And she also was an amazing inspiration because after following my dad, we moved around a lot throughout the years. We settled in California. And when I was settled in high school, my mom decided to go back to college, which she hadn't completed in Paraguay because she left the country with my dad. And she completed her degree with honors and graduated from college at the same time I graduated from high school. So my mom was an incredible inspiration at the same time that my dad was. And I'll tell you, while my dad's first job was at the U of A, he moved around a lot in terms of his career. We moved all over the country. We lived in Mexico. And even though he ended up working as a business professor, he always talked about standing up for what's right and human rights. He was an inspiration that he worked long hours. He wrote many papers. He started MBA programs with many universities internationally. And he always shared Edison's quote with me that success is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And so he always taught me that you have to work hard for what you want to accomplish. No matter how smart you are, you still gotta put in the work. And because of my dad's background, I was very interested in doing work in human rights. And I thought that I was gonna be a human rights lawyer. And so I went to college and I went to Berkeley, thinking that I was gonna be studying political science, international human rights, and eventually become a lawyer. And when I got to Berkeley, it was in 1992. And if you recall, at that time, there had just been a verdict acquitting 3 policemen for the brutal beating of Rodney King. Sound familiar? So there were riots throughout the country, and when I got to Berkeley, there were riots and protests at Berkeley. And as I was thinking about my career and thinking about what I wanted to do, I realized as I looked around, there are human rights issues right here in the United States, whether it's police brutality, social justice, homelessness, students not having equitable access to education based upon where they live, and I could go on. And it was at that point that I decided to change my thought in terms of wanting to be a human rights lawyer, going away to South America, to looking at human rights issues right here in our own country. And so after I graduated, I worked at a law firm for some time and then decided to shift to the nonprofit sector, where I thought that there could be a lot of opportunity to really make a difference in these issues that I cared about. And I soon learned about United Way. And so when I moved back to Orange County, which is where my family settled, because my dad was a professor at Cal State Fullerton at that time in business, I decided to just jump full-fledged into learning about the nonprofit community. And so I worked part-time at the city of Santa Ana, which is a county seat in Orange County, helping to administer their CDBG grants and ESG grants. And in doing that, I got to know the whole county of nonprofit organizations. And I was brought to Orange County United Way, Orange County United Way, drawn to Orange County United Way as I was doing some research on a grant opportunity. And back in the day, at the volunteer centers, you actually had binders with grant opportunities and then a binder with a job opportunity. And so I picked the binder with a job opportunity out of curiosity. And I found an incredible opportunity with Orange County United Way in community relations, helping to oversee a region, because they had just consolidated regional offices, and help with their relationships out in the community in that region. And so I started at the front lines at Orange County United Way. And let me tell you a little bit about that. So I joined Orange County United Way just about 21 years ago, 1999. Hard to imagine. And in my time there, I was so impressed by the organization and the opportunity that an organization like United Way has to sit at the nexus of business, the nonprofit community, the public sector, and to nonprofits, and to really be able to bring all of them together to be able to create community solutions. And I also appreciated that Orange County United Way, like Valley of the Sun United Way, and I'll get to that in a moment, is a countywide organization, can really have the big picture view of issues in a community and help to create the solutions, as I said. And so started at the front line there, helped to create new programs, then helped to raise money for the new programs, then was pulled into our resource development department to lead a major gifts program, which I grew, then was able to lead our fundraising program. And then when we had a new CEO come to town, I learned that from my work with major gifts, that individuals wanted to know when they're making contributions to an organization like United Way, to what end are their gifts being made? In other words, what change were we helping to create? And so I convinced our CEO at that time to open ourselves up and engage in a process to develop long-term goals for our organization that we could then measure ourselves against. So what you see on this screen is what we called our FACE 2024 plan. It was a 10-year community change plan that we launched in 2014, which focused on the issues of financial instability, education, health, and for the first time, we added homelessness and housing as an issue that we felt we needed to work on in that community. And the goals that we set in those areas were in the area of homelessness was to cut the percentage of homeless children in half. In the area of financial stability, to reduce the financially unstable families by 25% in terms of the numbers. In the education arena, we set a goal to cut the high school dropout rate in half. In the health arena, we set a goal to increase healthy youth by 1/3. And what you see in front of you is what we called a scorecard. We launched the plan in 2014. We published an annual scorecard on how we were doing against those goals and how the community was doing against those goals. It was a community-wide strategy. And we published that, and we held an event at which we reported on that. And that's what the picture at the right is of when we reported on these particular goals at every occasion. And when I left the Orange County United Way, we were 5 years into our 10-year plan. And I'm really pleased that when I left there, we had already met 2 out of the 4 10-year goals within 5 years. And so that's a testament to what gets measured gets done. And if you report progress and stay focused, you can absolutely make things happen. And then right before I left, as Janelle mentioned, I was able to launch an initiative called United End Homelessness, which was a result of our overall new focus on reducing homelessness. And there was really a need for a coordinated countywide effort to reduce homelessness by implementing specific strategies that were recommended through a cost study on homelessness that we actually initiated with UCI. So that was one of the proudest moments of my life in bringing together the county, local elected officials, the business sector, the community, all around some of the most important solutions to ending homelessness, including right before I left, we launched an initiative called the Welcome Home OC, which actually engaged landlords and private market apartment owners to be able to allow their apartments to be used for individuals with vouchers. And we as United Way actually created a landlord incentive program with a mitigation fund and all kinds of ways to recognize those who got involved. And so that brings me to what brought me here. I was really happy and so pleased to have done all the work that I was able to achieve at Orange County United Way. And also throughout the course of the years, I've been through some executive leadership training with United Way Worldwide and was ready for a new challenge. I was really pleased with what I had accomplished in Orange County. And I will share with you, and I'll share more about this a little bit later, Value the Sun United Way has been a model for United Way's work as an innovator throughout the country. And all my time that I was in Orange County, I saw many presentations and admired from afar the work that was done by Value the Sun United Way. And I brought my team from Orange County out here to visit the Value the Sun United Way 6 years ago to learn from this organization when we were launching our 10-year plan. Also at the same time, on the right, you see a wedding picture. That is my husband, Steve. We got married 2 years ago, and he actually had a job in Arizona, and he's been here for 6 years. And so all the things just came together, and I'll share that. I knew that Merle Washler, who was an amazing leader and so well regarded, was planning to retire. But I did not know that he had announced his retirement until I got a call from the recruitment firm who called me to ask if I would engage in a conversation with them about this potential leadership opportunity. And I'm so pleased that I did, because 6 months later, I walked in the door to Value the Sun United Way. So let me switch to the next slide here. Now this picture, you might recognize some of these guys, is taken at Merle's retirement party. And I knew that I had very, very big shoes to fill, not just with Merle, but by all the other leaders that you see on this screen that had been in this role, ranging from Paul Luna, who many of you know, who was CEO of Value the Sun many, many years ago, and Brian Hassett, who was CEO of Value the Sun United Way prior to Paul Luna, and is now CEO of the United Way in Nashville, Tennessee. So I knew I had huge shoes to fill, but it was a challenge and an opportunity I could not pass up. So let's talk about Value the Sun United Way. As Janelle mentioned, Value the Sun United Way has served the Maricopa County community for 95 years. It is an institution here, and there are so many amazing historical records that we have of its impact, and which we plan to celebrate this year as we're celebrating our 95th anniversary impacting the community. As I mentioned earlier, Value the Sun United Way is an innovator amongst its United Way peers. It has implemented programs that other United Ways have modeled and have wished that they could do, including Student United Way, which is a partnership with ASU and the United Way, which is the largest university United Way partnership in the country. They launched the 10-year community objectives plan, which I shared that I modeled my plan against in Orange County. They also have launched programs like virtual tutoring, like Velo, which many of you may have heard about, can help to tutor students in their classrooms. And we've now moved it to be able to be virtual in students' homes so that they can be able to read at grade level by 3rd grade, which is absolutely a key indicator for success. This United Way is also one of the top 5 United Ways in the nation. And at one point it was the #1 United Way. So this is an organization that is a winner, and as I said, I've admired for years and years, and you should all be really, really proud that it is your United Way as well. And then finally, as I mentioned, this United Way is an absolute model for my work in Orange County. I brought my team, as I mentioned, 6 years ago out here to learn from this organization, was welcomed with open arms by Merle and the leadership team, and we learned a whole lot from this organization and are so proud to have been able to do that. So let me tell you a little bit about, as I mentioned, in 2010, the organization launched a set of, launched a set of 10-year community objectives. And they included really focusing on reducing homelessness and hunger, increasing financial stability for families, preparing kids for kindergarten, and we have a significant partnership with First Things First to administer for them quality childcare assessments and also scholarships for low-income children to be able to access quality childcare throughout the state, and also ensuring kids graduate from high school. And so I joined the organization at a pivotal moment in that their 2010 plan expired in 2020. And so this is an incredible opportunity to engage with the community and to think about and to dream together about what were the issues that United Way should focus on going forward, and what should our impact plan be going forward, be it 5 years or 10 years. So I was really excited for what was ahead. And also, once I arrived, I'll share that I quickly learned that this was an organization facing some challenges. As with many organizations, you know, when you land at an organization, there are things that you don't know and that you couldn't presume to know before you got there, no matter how many questions you ask. And some challenges including decreasing revenue in terms of what has been experienced by the organization over the past several years. There were budget cuts that were made a week prior to my arrival that had an impact on staff reductions, had an impact on the reductions of funding available to our nonprofit partners in the way of grants. There were varying perceptions of opportunities for the organization, and there was impatience for change. And so truly the very first thing I did was look at the budget, understand what the implications were of it as it related to our staff and morale, and as it related to the external grant partners that we supported, and I immediately developed a communication plan with the team. So that was job number one. But in addition to that, as I'm sure that you've all experienced, when a new person joins your team, people say, "You're here now, so what's your plan?" And it was interesting because what I had to share with my team was that being new to the community, my plan was to not do anything for 100 days. And by not do anything, I mean not change anything for 100 days. It was really, really important, like I said, being new to the community, for me to take the time to get to know the team. Take the time to get to know the board of directors. Take the time to get input from our external stakeholders, donors, our corporate partners, community leaders, nonprofit partners, to really understand the dynamics of the organization and of the community. So as I said, I announced that my plan was to not make any changes for 100 days, and I laid out a 100-day plan to our board of directors and to our staff of what I plan to achieve in 100 days to get to know the community and to understand opportunities and challenges before developing a plan. So let me tell you a little bit about that. My approach was to shut up and listen for about 100 days. And let me tell you who I shut up and listened to. I identified a set of key stakeholders, as I mentioned, both external and internal, that was really important for me to, number one, get to know, because I was completely new to the community, introduce myself. Number two, hear their feedback and their input. And number three, I also realized that me being new here was a critical opportunity for me to leverage that newness to potentially re-engage some donors and corporate partners that may have drifted away from the organization. And so I did that. And some of what I heard, I will share, was that you know, really it was so important as I was talking to people to ask people to be candid, and they were, which is really important to me. I was able to really understand people's perceptions of the organization and the opportunities that we had, and I was able to really take the time to understand what the culture was like internally and what the culture was like with the board and with our nonprofit partners and with our corporate partners. So it was really fun. My team actually had a lot of fun with it in terms of my 100-day plan. We counted down the days. We had some videos that we published, which you might have seen, in which I shared some of my learnings along the way. And it worked. I had about 100 external meetings, maybe a little bit more during those first few months. I held 14 internal listening sessions with our staff at Valley of the Sun United Way to really understand from them what they felt was the current state of the culture, the preferred state of the culture internally, and what they wanted to see us do and be for the community. And the key was, I said I wasn't going to do anything for 100 days. After 100 days, I had to deliver. And so what I did was I was able to really listen to what it is that I heard from every single person that I met with. I had a notebook, obviously, of everything that I wrote down, filed it away. And at our board of directors retreat, which we held in November, I shared with them the good, the bad, and the ugly of what I heard along the way. I shared perceptions, I shared opportunities, and I shared my recommendations. And so let me share a little bit more about my approach. My approach was really, like I said, not to come in with an agenda. Being new to the community, I really needed to rely on people to be honest and candid with me and to share what it is that they wanted, share what it is that I wanted to hear. And so my approach was to really authentically listen and acknowledge everything that I heard. Wrote detailed emails back to everyone that I met with. I engaged those who may have been disheartened in other ways that they could get involved with the organization. And when you do this, I found that it really ensured the candid feedback, like I said, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It really helped me to inform future decisions as opposed to making decisions based upon assumptions. It helped to create stakeholders and the outcomes. I was able to really build some relationships with folks that may not have been as engaged or involved. And also our team, once we rolled out our plan, that was a result of the input, saw themselves and their voices in the plan that we developed. And it also helped me, as I said, being new to the community, to build relationships and trust with everyone that I met. For the most part, I think I've been able to really help to myself to build relationships, to know, who I need to work with closely in the community, who I can rely upon, and really just to help the United Way be the United Way it should be for this community. And then also, as I mentioned, it helped with my planning to be grounded on input and not on assumptions. So all of this then led to my proposing a 2020 plan. And as I mentioned, working my plan really is what helped me to formulate my recommendations that I made to the board, as I mentioned at the end of 2019, which included a vision for 2020 and a set of 2020 priorities. So let me tell you a little bit about that. My recommendation, after hearing the input that I heard, which included, our staff wanted us to be more transparent. They wanted stability. Our board wanted transparency, and I heard a lot about the desire for United Way to be more transparent and for people to really understand the decision making that had been undertaken in prior years. And so my proposal to the board was to really leverage 2020, both as the inflection point of the conclusion of the 10-year plan that I mentioned was launched in 2010, and our 95th anniversary, and really leverage it as a key transition point to do all these things that I like to call the re's, right? So to reopen the community, to reopen ourselves to the community in an authentic and transparent way. And so really, as I did, to open the whole organization, to get feedback and to have people feel like they're a part of our community, and we're here for them as the organization that is owned by the community, which I believe United Way is. We wanted to re-engage our partners, our stakeholders and donors to really invite their voices on issues that are facing Maricopa County residents today. And you all might have gotten a survey today, which is the second part of what we started earlier in the year to really understand issues, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. In doing all that, we would refresh our impact agenda, creating a new one, our relevance, and our brand in the community. And then we also really need to look at how we looked at our engagement philosophy and relationships with everyone that we worked with, including our donors, our nonprofit partners, corporate partners, and thought leaders. We also, gone are the days that we could, have the plug and play United Way, take your projector into the corporation, make a presentation, pass out pledge forms, and move on. No, the world's changed, right? Companies want to work with nonprofits differently. Companies have their own objectives of what they want to achieve in the community. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later, and that United Way needs to work differently in order to be a partner to those companies and the impact that they want to have. Also looking at how we reframe some of our business modeling in terms of our grant making and budgeting. And then overall, one of the things that I did here is that nonprofits and companies alike really were interested in seeing United Way step into more of a leadership role and helping to drive change around topical regional issues. So more about that later. And then in doing all that, the hope is, and I believe, that we will recapture the attention and investments of the Maricopa County business and philanthropic community. And we developed a set of 2020 priorities. And they were fivefold. And then we also established a diversity, equity, and inclusion priority and a task force that cut across all these priorities. The first one was to launch a deliberate outward-facing stakeholder and community engagement process. And this is along the lines of what you saw earlier to really make sure that we're addressing today's most pressing regional issues as United Way. That's what we're here for. We're here to meet the needs of the community at any given time. Help to understand aspirations for change, barriers aside, what do people want to see change in this community over the next 5 years? So we have time-bound goals, similar to what I shared that we had in Orange County. And then what is United Way's best role to help achieve those aspirations? Do we convene, do we lead, do we support from behind? We can do all those things. And question is, in all those particular issues, what should our role be? That's number one, in terms of our impact planning. Number two has to do with how we work with companies, right? United Ways have traditionally been built upon, after they were built to support people in war times as a community test. In the modern world, United Ways are built to really partner with companies and helping them give their employees opportunity to give through payroll deductions for employee giving campaigns, and also working with companies to help them meet their objectives. And as I mentioned earlier, we needed to really think differently about how we did that as companies are more interested in and had corporate social responsibility objectives. So how do we reframe our approach to working with companies from an annual campaign mentality to an ongoing partnership mentality and co-creating opportunities for them that help to meet how they want to impact the community? The third, which is a little bit more challenging now, as you can imagine, is we have a beautiful office space that was built to serve as a community meeting area and was built to be a telecommuting, hoteling space. Most of it is plug and play, workstations where people can sit. And so we were really thinking about how can we examine the redeployment of our office space as a community asset, meaning can we potentially, lease a certain number of plug-in spaces to our nonprofit partners, meaning how do we make it more available for meeting use and that type of thing. We're looking at that a little bit differently now, as you can imagine, given the fact that we have activated working remotely as everybody has, but we're looking at other infrastructural supports we might be able to provide to the community other than our office space. We're looking at reframing some of our business modeling in terms of grants, as I mentioned, and then going back to our roots in terms of really maximizing our outreach and revenue through donor circles and major gifts. We have our Tocqueville Society, we have many million-dollar donors who have given to our endowment. We have our Women United group, we're thinking about starting the lawyers groups. There are lots of opportunities to create affiliative opportunities for people to give and to, again, go back to some of our roots and how we raised significant resources in the past from the philanthropic community of Maricopa County. And then, as I mentioned, we have our diversity, equity, and inclusion commitment, which we established a task force for, along with all 5 of these others, to help us to get this work moving forward in January. And so, obviously, as with any organization, as you're looking at new priorities, you need to look at how you're going to achieve those priorities. And so I implemented a reorganization of our team in order to align ourselves with those priorities. And that required making some tough decisions, as you can imagine, but they're the right decisions. And the team is energized and on board with the direction that we were moving in. We also realigned our board so that each one of our board members was committed to a task force in support of each one of those priorities. And then, of course, I had to absolutely communicate the 2020 vision, the priorities, and the realignments that we undertook, both from the staff perspective and from the board perspective, with transparency and optimism. And I communicated those far and wide. We communicated those far and wide. Hopefully many of you received some of those communications, communicated with staff very transparently, shared this with our past chairs who we engaged, and an event, which was something that was really special as well. We held a reception with our nonprofit partners to make sure that they were all aware and aligned and on board. I was excited, they were excited, and I think everyone saw their input in the plan and the priorities based on the time that we had spent together in my first 4 to 5 months on the job. So once we communicated all those priorities, so we began. Let me tell you a little bit about how we did that. So we began with our very first priority, which was to open ourselves up to the community to get feedback on the most important issues facing Maricopa County residents, and also asking what should United Way's role be in helping to drive change around those issues. So we launched a community survey. It looked like this. Some of you may have gotten it in February. And we scheduled a set of input sessions in March with our nonprofit partners and with thought leaders around the areas we focused on previously of hunger, homelessness, financial stability, education, et cetera, that I mentioned, to start that process of really refining and thinking about what issues United Way should focus on. And as it were, we faced a case of Murphy's Law of inverse preparedness, right? We did the research, we put together a plan, we got buy-in from stakeholders, we were ready to go with our planning process, and then came COVID. So our input sessions that I mentioned were scheduled with our partners, were scheduled, think back to March. I mean, March was when everything changed in our community. March 12th, we had the state of emergency in Arizona declared by the governor. March 15th, it was announced that schools would be closed. And it was March 17th that we had our session scheduled with our nonprofit partners and thought leaders to really begin the planning process around issues that United Way should focus on and start to set goals. So we faced a real inflection point and decision point there. We could have canceled those sessions completely and postponed our planning, or we could have held those sessions and just shifted the focus. And so that's what we decided to do. We decided to keep those sessions, hold them virtually, shift the focus to ask about what the current needs are that our nonprofit partners are feeling and thought leaders, and what were future concerns. And then we also asked, what role should United Way play in times like this? And what role should United Way be playing now? And this graphic depicts this. It's all things that we already know and that we've all seen play out and come to fruition in terms of the current needs: food, rental assistance, payroll. Nonprofits were facing terrible situations of event cancellations and lost revenue. And future concerns of, education. What's going to happen if schools closures are extended? We're seeing it happening right now. And what's going to happen as people stay home in terms of mental health and other potential issues that could arise there, including domestic violence. And the opportunities that we saw are all on the bottom, if you can see them. And when we asked our partners what role they thought that we should play, they really asked us to be a voice for them in the needs in the community, what issues they were seeing and how they were needing to serve their clients with less resources, and helping to secure more resources rather than each one of them securing resources on their own. And so that led us to pivot. We paused our 2020 priorities, and we launched a United for the Valley COVID-19 fund. And all of our staff thought about how we can support our community differently through this time, beyond just funding. And so we set a goal. We seeded the fund with $200,000. We set a target to raise $1 million to get it started. I set the target for us to raise $1 million in 1 week and was on the phone all weekend, and my team was all about getting the asks out. We made $100,000 asks as our first start. And we hit $1 million in our first week, and we immediately initiated a grant process specifically to our health and human service and education nonprofit partners in Maricopa County that week, and we put out grants every week since then. And today we're launching a second part of that grant process, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. And we partnered with the Arizona Community Foundation in doing so, with our process being focused on Maricopa County health and human service and education nonprofits, and theirs being statewide for any nonprofit. And that was an amazing new partnership for us, which has been a wonderful new opportunity for us to continue to partner with them more closely. And this is a quote you can see from Mike Hughes, a nonprofit leader who many of you know from A New Leaf. And he was one of the leaders who really said that United Way could play, and he wanted us to play, a critical role in bringing everyone together through this time and supporting them. So this just shows a little bit of a summary of what our response has been. We've raised just now about $2 million. We put out about half of that to emergency grants to all of the nonprofit partners that we support. So they've all gotten one grant. We were thinking about moving into a different phase of what we thought was going to be recovery. We're not recovering. We're still in emergency mode. And so we decided to open up another grant process today for emergency grants, which we'll be telling the team about and the community about very shortly. As I mentioned, we had a new partnership with ACF. We've been putting out and collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of in-kind support for the community. You saw my team member Jared on the screen previously wearing the mask. We do have a number of our team members helping with that in the field and doing so very carefully and getting things out, ranging from sanitizer drums from Procter & Gamble to diapers to anything that you can imagine, and it's been incredibly significant. We've also continued to hold these virtual sessions with our nonprofit partners. We've held them every 2 weeks, so it's now been 16 partner sessions, which have been very well attended. And we've looked at how we can work with them more collaboratively, both through our fundraising and through marketing. And that was at their request. And so this is going to be something we're going to continue to look at. It's the notion of shared services and thinking about how our infrastructure can support our nonprofit community differently beyond just the building, as I mentioned earlier. And we transitioned that virtual tutoring program that I mentioned earlier called Velo to shift from being provided in the classroom virtually with someone like me here on the computer and the student in the classroom getting some tutoring to doing it in the home. And that's been very, very successful. So with all that, I'm gonna take a drink of water, give me a minute. So it's been a year. It's been a year for all of us, absolutely, as you know. That brings us to today. And before I share, I have some top 10 lessons I want to share with you in the spirit of David Letterman for my first year as a CEO. But I did want to share that this last week was the conclusion of our fiscal year and my first official year as CEO. And I am more than happy to share that we closed the year exceeding our revenue goals and under budget, which was for the first time in many years. And I could not be more thrilled. And of course, it's a big phew as a new leader, right? We also, as I mentioned, are launching a second round of emergency granting to our nonprofit partners from the United for the Valley COVID-19 Fund today. And we also today launched a second version of our community survey. So if you got that, please take the time to fill it out. We're going to compare what issues people felt were most important in February when we first launched to now in COVID and post-COVID. And we all know the dramatic inequities that have been made very clear through COVID-19, both in terms of the disproportionality of African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, being sick and being impacted economically. We also know about the educational inequities that have been made very clear from that. We also know about the racial inequities that have been made incredibly clear from that and the systemic racism that still exists in our community. So there's a lot of work still to be done. And United Way will continue to support our community however we can now while we relaunch our work with our 2020 priorities. So let me share my top 10 lessons learned from my first year as CEO. So lesson number 1, look at the budget first. As I mentioned, that was the very first thing that I did, and I'm glad I did. Look at the budget first, compare to the year prior, ask a lot of questions, don't stop until you get them answered. And in doing so, you'll be able to identify implications immediately and manage them. And as I mentioned, that is where I learned quickly that we needed to take a look at and re-educate our board and our team about budget reductions that we had. The budget reductions were because we had revenue reductions, and be able to translate that externally to our partners about why their grants were being reduced. It was not willy-nilly. It was based on some of our historical trends that we had faced, and we needed to be really transparent and clear about that, in addition to the number of folks that had been let go prior to me coming to the organization. So look at the budget first, know what you need to manage it. Number 2, don't come in with a plan, but have a plan to develop a plan. So that's talking about what I shared with me coming in, and you can't presume that you know anything about an organization before getting there, even though you may in the big picture. You need to take time to get to know the organization. You need to get to know its people. You need to understand the opportunities and really understand the challenges. And so me having a 100-day plan, which was my plan to develop the plan, really helped me with that, and I think helped me to develop a plan that was even more relevant and impactful and important for the organization. Number 3, shut up and listen. I said that earlier. I think people sometimes come into a new role, want to tell everyone everything that they know and what their plans are. And I think that the time that I took to ask questions, be quiet, listen, and really synthesize all of it over a period of time really helped me to both build trust and help me to develop a plan that was grounded in input. Number 4, build a core group of advisors. So I came to the Valley of the Sun United Way with already a kitchen cabinet of amazing advisors from my work in Orange County, who were great sounding boards for me as I got acclimated here. But even more importantly, develop a good group of advisors. And you see here Jenny Holzman-Tacher, our board chair, pictured. She's been an amazing advisor to me, as has our executive committee. Also quickly met with, for example, past leaders like Paul Luna to get perspective and to get guidance. And I've met with him several times, as well as many of our past board chairs, campaign cabinet chairs, of course, Merle Washler, and my team internally. Really had to build a team internally that was my team. And it's just so important to be able to have that, to be able to bounce things off of when things may be questionable, or you just need a little bit of support because you might not know all the dynamics in a particular situation. Number 5, communicate clearly and, hold on. Okay, number 5, communicate clearly and often. And this relates to everything. It relates to, what my 100-day plan was, why I wanted to do it. It relates to, communicating immediately about budget reductions, so there was no surprise, and being able to really be on the same page about everything that was happening. It has to do with, communicating about our 2020 priorities immediately, and the reorganization that we implemented, and why, getting that out far and wide. Monthly updates to our board, and when we went virtual, we initiated weekly meetings virtually with our team to keep everyone connected and to just share anything that we knew, good, bad, or ugly. Things are so uncertain. If nothing else, just share that things are so uncertain. It's so important, and helps to make sure that people are on the same page and that you're not holding anything back, because there's no reason to do that. Number 6, be transparent. Those two go together. And it may seem obvious, but so many people in organizations, as I've seen and experienced, feel the need to message or spin bad news. And my approach from the beginning has been transparency, especially when I saw the budget and knew that that was really something that needed to be managed, not something to be spun, so that people knew where we were coming from, understood the challenges, and at the same time, understood the opportunities ahead. So I think, again, this is where the good, the bad, and ugly is so, so, so important. Number 7, have a vision and be optimistic. Hope is a stronger motivator than fear in any circumstance. And especially during times of volatility and uncertainty, if people know you believe in the plan, and I did believe in the plan, the 2020 plan that we established based upon the feedback that I was able to garner over the course of 4 or 5 months. I believed in it. I'm still excited about it. I still believe in it, and it's going to happen. We just did what we needed to do as an organization in terms of pausing and focusing on what was right in front of us, because that was most important. You can't plan ahead when there's a crisis right in front of you. And number 8, take the time to build trust. I talked about that earlier, so critically important. Really believe that the time that I took to get people's feedback and incorporate into our 2020 plan built trust for me of the people that I talked to, and for them, hopefully built trust in me and our organization in terms of really wanting to be an organization that took input in and responded to community needs. And I think that trust that we built really gave us the opportunity to pivot quickly. I know that's an overused word right now, but to pivot quickly, pause from our prior work, and refocus on, again, what was ahead to really address the needs due to COVID. And that takes me to something that my team laughs at me in saying, but I think maybe realizes it might be somewhat true, which is, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? In any circumstance, whether it's a promotion, whether it's anything in life, but this really applies to, if you don't ask for feedback, you don't get it. If you don't ask for dollars, you don't get it. If you don't ask for anything in life, you don't get it. And I think that this became clear as we launched our United for the Valley COVID-19 Fund, having set that $1 million goal, and I was set on doing it in a week and set on making many $100,000 asks to get there, and we got there. So if you don't ask, you don't get. And finally, this one is related to living with my husband for the first time. So we were married for about a year before I came here, but we've been together for 10 years. And I'll tell you, there's more involved than just making room in the closets. He made room for me in the closets, but as with anything, many transitions at once. It's been a wonderful year. He's my biggest supporter and biggest partner, but there is much more involved than just making room in the closets. I'll leave it at that. So with that, I really want to thank you for taking the time to have me, allowing me to share my story, my lessons learned along the way. It's absolutely been a pleasure. And again, as I said, this is not just my story. This is the story of a number of incredible and remarkable women who brought me here, supported me, partnered with me along the way. I thank them all, and I thank you all for allowing me to share today. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Well, awesome. Carla, thank you so much. And thank you for your leadership within the community. Valley of the Sun United Way has really stepped up, obviously, through the COVID crisis and made a huge impact. So we all appreciate your leadership and appreciate you sharing such great advice with us as well. So again, we really appreciate you being here. We do have a few minutes for questions, and we have a few that have come in. So we'll jump right to the audience Q&A. One of the questions was sent when you were talking a little bit about your fundraising campaigns and pivoting there, but ask if you have ever encountered an unenergized donor culture, and then what did you do to change that momentum?
So that's an interesting question, and I might just turn that around a little bit. So I don't think that I've encountered an unenergized donor culture. I think that in coming here, I may have encountered a team that was deflated, in terms of not being able to, or having challenges with, hitting goals, leadership in terms of, someone who really helped to motivate people to drive them, and support from the leadership perspective and helping to really get there. And so I think that the motivation is key. I think having that vision is key. And I think getting in the trenches with the team who's raising money is key, and meeting with donors. And so I think that that's really helped us. And I think that that's just a way to turn that around.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I know we have such a large nonprofit culture here that I'm sure many of your colleagues in the sector are on this call and appreciate that. Another question is, what advice do you have for the rising female leaders who are watching the webinar, both personal and professional advice?
Okay, well, two things. From the professional perspective, I would say, actually from the professional and personal perspective, I have two things. One is say yes to everything. Every opportunity that comes your way, say yes. If something comes up and people are asking for a volunteer, raise your hand. It's how you learn, it's how you grow, it's how you're seen, and it's how you gain skills. So say yes. The other thing I would say, both in your personal and professional lives, is trust your gut. Trust your gut. Just if something doesn't feel right, it's not right. If something feels like you should do it, you should probably do it. And that takes a little bit of time to develop because we can all question ourselves, but trust your gut, 100%.
Absolutely. That's great advice. You talked a little bit about your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Perfect. So obviously that is a huge deal right now in our society. Can you expand a little bit more on what that's going to look like and how that might roll out in our community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned that in January, we established a diversity, equity, and inclusion priority and a task force that's chaired by Maria Harper-Marinick and by Ruben Alvarez. And we've established a task force of our board and of our staff. And that got put on pause with COVID-19. But as I mentioned earlier, COVID-19 exposed a lot of inequities. And in the midst of all the pain that we were seeing with African-American community, we saw the murder of a gentleman, George Floyd, on camera by policemen. And so we've seen so many more inequities really come to light. And so we have reactivated our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We actually posted a statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion that we will stand in solidarity with organizations and individuals to combat racial injustice. And United Ways throughout the country have been doing work in this area for quite some time. We have not as an organization, but we are now. And so we're starting internally with an assessment of all of our own policies and practices and really having our staff's voice in that and our board's oversight in that and our board looking at their policies and practices. And we plan to, by January, have an action plan of what we plan to do as an organization. And at the same time, we're making sure that we can help voices to be heard now that should be heard including through voter registration, which is so important for key populations, and also through ensuring that key populations fill out the census, because that absolutely dictates resources that are made available.
Absolutely, great. Thank you for sharing that. We are starting to run out of time, but one last thing I'd like to ask you to share. Obviously, you came to Phoenix not too long ago and had no idea what was in store for you over the past year. But obviously, there's a lot of things in the news that are not so positive. Tell us what still excites you about Phoenix and our future as a community.
Yeah, this community is such a dynamic community. It is growing, it is diverse, it is welcoming. People want to see change. So I think that there's a huge opportunity. I think there's a lot of energy. I think that people's attention is on the issues that need to be addressed right now. And like I mentioned, the digital divide, for example, it's real. It's right here in Phoenix. It's not something that's happening somewhere else. And we have an opportunity to do something about that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us. I think there's a lot of engagement. I think people's attention is focused on the issues right now that needs to be focused on, and we can harness that and make a huge difference. And I just want to say, Kristen St. Marie, who noticed, could Carla slow down in her speech? I know I talk fast. I apologize. One of my board members said I speak at Carla's speed, so I tried hard not to. But thank you for that comment.
Oh, thank you so much, Carla. We really appreciate your time today. It was a great presentation, and hopefully we can get some more people involved with Valley of the Sun United Way and all of the great work that you're doing. So again, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. We would absolutely welcome that. And thank you, Janelle, and to all for inviting me. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to share my contact information. I'm happy to connect with anybody.
Absolutely. On that note, I just want to thank again our sponsors, APS, BOK Financial, Slalom, and University of Phoenix. We appreciate all that you do. We appreciate everyone who joined us today. Thank you for continuing to support the Professional Women's Alliance, and we will hopefully see you next month on Tuesday, August 4th. Thank you again, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.